What's up, everybody? If you're a buyer and you're getting ready to purchase a home, there are some expenses that you have to account for and you have to properly budget for, right? There are these things called closing costs. Have you ever heard of those? Closing costs. Who pays for these closing costs? They're kind of like ninjas. When you least expect it, they're hiding in a bush and they'll jump out and get you. So you want to plan for these closing costs. In this video, I touch on closing costs, who pays them, and what you need to do to make sure that you're prepared for them when they hit you at closing. My name is Stephen Kotovash, and I'm a realtor located in the northern Atlanta area, and I get to help people buy and sell houses every day. One of the big pieces of advice that I give my clients when they're buying a home is, hey, make sure that you think about all of those other expenses that you may not think about when you initially are considering purchasing a home. Because of course everyone thinks about down payment, right? That's a big one. You've got to have a nice down payment, or ideally you'd want a nice down payment. Well, there are these things called closing costs that can creep in on you if you don't prepare for them. So I always tell my clients, let's plan on, this is kind of a general US average, 2 to 4% of the purchase price of your property is what you could be looking at in closing costs. Now, yeah, 4% might be a little high in most parts of the country. 2 might be a little low, so those are extreme. So just plan on somewhere in the 2 to 4% range, and that gives you an idea of what you'll have to pay. When buyers come to closing, they can pay for closing costs out of pocket. You have that option, or you can do what is called roll it into your mortgage. So even though it gets quote unquote rolled into your mortgage so you don't have to come out of pocket at closing, it's still a real expense that you have to eventually pay for. So just keep that in mind. Even if you roll it into the mortgage, it's still there and something that you will owe. Hold up, before we go further, do me a favor and please hit the like button and hit the subscribe button for me. I appreciate it. So when you are buying that home, typically the buyer pays majority of the closing costs. Now, in the negotiation for your property, you can always ask for some seller paid closing costs. So sometimes, depending on the market, sometimes the seller can contribute some money toward closing costs. But in general, the buyer is going to pay most of the closing costs. So what type of fees and costs are we talking about? One is legal fees. So you're going to have legal fees because you're typically going to work with an attorney to conduct your closing. Now, this attorney is not representing the buyer or the seller, but they are there to complete the transaction. They do a lot of work in the background to prepare the property to be closed. So there are legal fees that you have to account for that are all lumped into closing costs. When you buy a home, there's something called an appraisal fee that you have to pay for. So your lender is going to order an appraisal. So they'll order an appraisal, the appraiser will come out, take a look at the home, and they've got to value the home to make sure that it's worth the price that you're under contract for. So this appraisal it's usually a few $100s. Something else, once again, that gets rolled into closing costs. So don't forget about that appraisal fee. Also, there's something called title insurance policy. So if you're purchasing a home, this is insurance policy that protects you against title claims down the road, future title claims down the road. So title insurance on a property, it can be $1,000, $2,000. I've seen it even close to $3,000 depending on where you're at in the country and the size of the property. But like all insurance, it's something you can purchase kind of like a just in case you need it. And a lot of times now title insurance is optional, but it's something that a lot of people do decide to purchase. There are recording and documentation fees as well. There are several companies that are involved in helping you close your property. You've got some courier fees, and these are typically low, less than 75, 50 bucks, something like that. But you also have some bank fees potentially. So if you are wiring money, there's probably a wiring fee that's included too. You guys are probably getting mad at me about right now, right? You're probably thinking, holy cow, I didn't know all of these fees are involved and closing on a property. But I want to be real with you so you're not caught off guard, because the worst thing ever is to not plan for things like this. And then you get caught later, and then you're shocked, and who knows, maybe your entire deal falls through because you didn't plan for things like this appropriately. Sometimes there are prepaid property taxes and utilities that the seller, they've paid already. So in that case, the buyer will need to reimburse them for that at closing. So that doesn't happen in all cases, but that is something that could come up. I know I've talked a lot about different fees that can and will come up for closing, and your head might be spinning and you might be thinking, well, how in the world do I keep up with all this? Well, there's something called a settlement disclosure that you will get your hands on right before closing. So you'd work with your realtor and you guys would review this settlement statement. And so in this statement, you're going to get an itemized list of these expenses and fees that I talked about. So everything is detailed out for you, and it gets added up at the very bottom, and you can look through it together to make sure that things are exactly as you planned for. So you do get a chance to review all this before closing, so you just don't get hit with it there at the closing table. Before you hop off my channel, I've got a really cool video to share with you. Check this one out. It's called Red Flags When Buying a House. If you're in the market to purchase a home, and if you hear or see of these items that I talk about in this video, do not buy. Do not buy, because you're going to have buyer's remorse. In real estate, none of us like surprises, right? I mean, me as a realtor, I like to prepare, and over-prepare so that we have all of our ducks in a row and that we aren't getting caught off guard somewhere in the entire process. So that's why I think things like closing costs are super important, so that you all can really think through those items and figure out what it's going to cost you. So I hope you learned a little something for this video, and I hope that it helps you to budget wisely. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next one.